I'm not an accomplished writer. I'm a little rusty, and this is my first post. Back in my early 20s, 33 now, I worked at an adult novelty store. I was used to creepers, and not much fazed me at this point in my brief employment. A typical day consisted of an array of colourful people, all of which I'm sure would make great entries, especially the geriatric men that would come in and act like they had bad eyesight, and have me read the directions on the back of the penis enhancement creams to get cheap thrills. Gross, I know. After a while, you just learn how to deal with these people, and to make them move on. Applying for this job, I was naive to the extent of the nut jobs I would have before me. This job was actually very character building in many ways. Enough about that. This particular day I was working an all-day Sunday shift. Normal to have but a handful of customers. So I was camped out in my desk chair inside the circle counter, in the middle of the store, watching my Golden Girls box set on the television that hung above me. Typical Sunday. I'm assuming it was nearing 1 p.m. At the time, I happened to look out the glass store windows to see a red pickup pull into a parking space way far back in the lot. Strange. There were no cars but mine parked out front. The store was completely isolated except for a 7-Eleven caddy corner, separated by an alley. So I was all alone. I see a skinny guy get out and start to slowly make his way to the storefront. He comes in, I greet him with a hey, and he just stands there. I turn away from him enough to keep him in my peripheral. Then he slowly proceeds towards me. He makes his way up to the counter, and I'm now facing him. He had bloodshot, watery eyes, dressed in baggy clothes and a cap. He hands me a wad of dirty, crumpled money and says in a monotone voice, "I found this in the parking lot. I wanted to give it to you in case someone wants to reclaim it." I said for him to keep it. He did not bend over in the lot to pick up anything on his way to the store. I also found it strange he parked so far away. I was onto him, but already getting creeped. I just wanted him to go away. He gave me a sick feeling, considering the clientele. This was a big deal. He told me to take the money several times, and was so persistent. Wanting him to just get the hell out, I took the money. He then said to me, "Whatever you do, don't give it back to me." I said, "Okay." He starts to slowly walk up, and just as he reaches the door and I'm about to sigh my breath of relief, he turns and inches his way back towards me. "Can I have that money back?" he asks. "I thought you said you didn't want it." I replied, "I don't," he said. "Okay, I'll keep it here for safekeeping." That went on for a few solid minutes. I knew I was dealing with a real piece of work. They kept trying to get behind me, and I was wheeling around in a circle so I could face him at all times. His eyes were so intense and fixated on me the entire time. When he finally left, I was shaken, because he was so eerie. I looked down at the filthy, tattered, crumpled money, and counted out 6 $1 bills. What the hell? I thought, but I shook it off as another day in the life of the sex shop. A couple of hours go by, and I swept all the previous weirdness under the rug. It was a slow day, and the store was dead. Then, lo and behold, in he slowly walked. Again. My heart sinks. I grab my phone. He walks up to me and asks if anyone had come in to claim the money. I say no, and point to the money on the counter. Believe me when I say I did not want this money for myself. He then asked for it back. I said that I thought he told me not to give it back. I felt like this was some weird, sick game I was involved in, and his character was so off-putting and unpredictable I felt like I needed to play along. He then proceeds to beg me for the money, and that he needed it really bad. I broke. I hand it to him, his eyes burning into mine, his face expressionless and voice flat. I told you not to give it back to me. I froze up. We just stared at each other and I was picturing gravestones in my head. It felt like eternity. Then, ding dong, a couple walk in. That's when he grabs the $6 and leaves. I'm pretty sure something bad would have gone down if people hadn't come in. He never lunged at me, but there was something sinister about him. I told my co-worker shortly after. She said it had happened to another girl that worked there too. But he didn't stick around because there were two people working. A completely different type of freak I was used to. I had another creepy incident with a man pleasuring himself in front of the glass windows at night, after I had locked the door. That one I had no questions to involve the police, and I quit. And that was a weird little moment in my life. I have several stories I'd like to put on here. This one is a good tame one to break the ice. So creepy, menacing guy with $6. Let's not meet again. Never. So I'll start off by saying that this story is pretty long, and is going to make my friend and I sound like complete fucking idiots. This is because we are. We completely ignored everything we've ever been told about stranger danger and basic safety because, hey, we're both 20-year-old college dudes. I'm also not the best writer, so bear with me. This happened last Sunday. My parents are pretty well off and love to travel to exotic destinations. They planned a trip to St. Lucia and extended an invitation to my sister, her boyfriend, and my friend Vince and I. St. Lucia is a small mountainous jungle island near the coast of Venezuela. It's a significantly underdeveloped nation with an all-cash economy, where few taxes are collected and spent for the good of the commons. Violent crime on the island is not unheard of. There are a few paved roads, a few major favela-like towns, and a couple of small, secluded, high-end, boat-accessible resorts. We stayed at one of these resorts. My parents were in one room, and the rest of us all stayed in a room next door. The rooms were more like little huts, open entirely to the outdoors with easily accessible rooftops, above and below. All was well for most of the trip. We went hiking, snorkeling, and relaxed on the beach. As much as my friend and I enjoyed it, this resort was meant for honeymooners, not for college kids looking to have a wild time. One night Vince and I were up drinking late at the bar, which was not extremely lively as usual, and we get to talking with the bartender Gustavo. We bond with Gustavo over our interest in Yeezy, Wheezy, and girls, and nothing seemed off at all. We asked him if he knew any clubs, or where to go to have a good time in town. He told us about how we had to leave the resort to really experience St. Lucia as we expected. He offered to take us to his place sometime, to show us the good time we'd been looking for. He then showed us a picture of his house. This should have been the first red flag. But we were drinking, and had no reason not to trust our new friend. Gustavo had a massive house for St. Lucian standards, complete with a huge flat-screen TV, pool table, bar, and a Camaro. We'd been around the island a bit at this point, and had not seen a house or a car half as nice as his. We told him we'd be interested, but would have to let him know when we could go later. The next day we get a text from Gustavo midday, saying that a boat was at the dock to pick us up. This was strange to Vince and I since we hadn't agreed upon a time. We told him that we had plans and couldn't go during the day anyway. This seemed to piss him off a little bit. The next day, whenever Vincent and I would see Gustavo at the resort, he lacked enthusiasm and ignored us when we said hello to him. The following day, however, Gustavo was off work and texting us like we were best friends again. He asked us if we could come to his place, and he told us he was making pizza and had girls lined up and some of that good. Knowing that my parents would never let me do something so risky, we told him we could only go after 10 because my parents were most likely going to be asleep at that point. He agreed, but was kind of annoyed and made it sound like we owed him and better not bail again. On a side note, I've never done coke, but my friend Vincent has. I was slightly worried but figured I'd just say no like Dare taught me or whatever and still have a good time. Besides, we couldn't bail twice. As 10 o'clock rolled around, my parents had gone to sleep. My sister and her boyfriend had gone elsewhere, and Vincent and I finished up pre-gaming at the beach bar near the dock until it closed for the night. It started getting very dark, and soon Vincent and I were about the only ones down at the dimly lit beach area. This is when things really start to get sketchy. Around 10:45, we get a call from Gustavo saying something along the lines of, "Plans have changed. The boat taxi is no longer being arranged through the resort. A guy is coming to pick you up. The fare is going to be more expensive now, around 100 USD, plus tip. He's nice, but he has a temper, and he's in a hurry, so don't piss him off. Look for the green and yellow boat and just get in." The unfamiliar flat and low tone of the voice that he used sent chills down our spine, and suddenly we knew we were in serious trouble. We only had $140 on us together, and immediately agreed that we would wait for the boat, give him the cash, and say we couldn't go anymore. A few minutes later, we get another call saying, "The guy is going to be a little late. He has some drop-offs to make. But if you're not at the dock when he gets there, he will be knocking on room 17. Don't make him knock." Room 17 is the room my parents are staying in. Vincent is about to throw up at this point. Trying to stay calm, I suggest that we hide our phones and wallets nearby just in case to try to mug us. There's nobody but us at the beach at this point. I could barely make out some small boats far out in the bay, but they hadn't moved in a while. We were standing on a small rock peninsula, at the side of a cliff surrounded by black water with a single dim lamp overhead. We cannot run and we cannot hide. My parents and my sister and her boyfriend may be in serious danger if we do. 11:30 p.m. We get another call from Gustavo. "There will be 3 boats coming, just get in." This is now obviously fucked. We are fucked. We are so fucked. Why the fuck are there 3 boats? Vincent and I are both pretty skinny guys. There's no way we could fight more than one person. It's a perfect kidnapping, I thought to myself. Vincent and I are both weak young adults that come from apparent well-off families who didn't tell anyone where they were going or what they were doing. Gustavo knew all these things, and obviously had the resources and connections to pull abduction off, or worse. I spot what appears to be a security guard making rounds down the beach a ways, and immediately walk as fast as I can to him with Vincent. I explained, without using Gustavo's name, that we were supposed to be picked up by 3 boats, and that we feel extremely uncomfortable after recent events, and just want to pay the boat captain and leave. My hope was that if we did get kidnapped, at least one person would know where the fuck we went or what happened to us. He assured us that no boats come around at this time, and that we shouldn't wait too much longer. We walk not 100 feet before we get the single most chilling text I've ever read. Did you just talk to security? Vince and I both froze and stared at each other for a few seconds. We decided to reply and said we were just chatting with them and heading back, and that we can't go anymore because it's too late. He quickly replied, "Don't worry." We replied, "Seriously, don't send the boats, we're not going anymore." Once again, his response was, "Don't worry." Followed by yet another, "Don't worry." And that was the last we heard from him. I've seen movies. Coke dealers don't usually treat rats very nicely. Maybe Gustavo knew that I didn't use his name, and maybe that's why we were able to get out of this mess. Was the security guard in on it? Or were we being watched the whole time? I will never know. Not knowing what to do, Vincent and I started climbing the few hundred stairs up the mountain, back to our room with purpose. It was dark now, with only the occasional dim lamp along the way. Every single sound, every single movement in the surrounding jungle scared the living shit out of us. I've never been this afraid in my entire life. We get back to the room and lock the door, and I go out to the patio to silently watch the easily climbable roofs like a fucking hawk. Vincent swears that he saw hands on the edge of the roof, but they were gone when I pointed my phone's flashlight at them. For the next 2 hours I sat there, head on a swivel, ready to fucking scream to wake up my family and fight for my life. While freaking the fuck out, I saw a meteor burn up in the clear night sky, which was easily the highlight of my night. So that was pretty cool, I guess. Eventually I figured it was over, and I went to bed. Relieved to wake up in the morning without my throat slit, I relaxed a bit. Luckily we were checking out of the hotel at 11, so we wouldn't have to run into Gustavo again. Before leaving the resort, Vincent and I wandered down to the beach to kill some time. That's when two large native men that did not appear to work at the resort approached us. The larger one said, "Hey, are you the guys that were supposed to be on the boat last night? You know, Gustavo?" I replied no, trying my best to sound somewhat confused. "How much longer are you guys staying?" he asked. "We're leaving in an hour," I replied. He looked at me with an "I know you're lying to me" face, held out his fist, grinned and said with a low voice, "Safe trip home." I bumped his fist and walked away, trying to stay cool. I felt like everyone who worked at the resort was looking at us and whispering about us for the next hour. I just wanted to get the fuck out. I didn't feel safe until we made the hour drive to the airport and got through security. Gustavo and your friends, let's not meet again. This happened a couple of years ago, when my husband, son and I were living in an apartment in my town. The apartments were converted from old motel rooms, all ground level, and strung together in a row. We lived in an end apartment, so we only shared one wall with a neighbor. When we moved in, our neighbor was a nice, quiet man that wasn't home much. He moved out, and a new person moved in. My husband was outside having a smoke when the new man was moving things inside. My husband made small talk with him for a moment and told me he was a pleasant, elderly man. Everything was fine for a couple of weeks. My husband works nights, so it's just my son, he was 7 at the time, and I home at night. One night, about 1 a.m., my son was thirsty, so he got up to get himself a glass of water. He went into the living room while I was filling the glass and picked up a toy. He brought it to the kitchen and accidentally dropped it. It made a very loud noise on the linoleum floor. We went back to bed. About 5 minutes later, there was a loud knocking at my door. I thought maybe it was my husband, getting off early for some reason, and had forgotten his key. But when I looked out the peephole, it was our new next-door neighbor. I cracked the door open a bit and said, "Yes?" "I'm trying to sleep," he shouted. "I'm so sorry," I said. "We'll keep it down." A few days later, my landlord came over because he needed to check the fuse box or something. I don't really remember the specifics. While he was there, he said, "Have you had any problems with your new neighbor?" I told him about the man coming over and yelling at me that he was trying to sleep. My landlord shook his head and said, "Well, he seems to have a problem with you. He came into my office and told me that your son sneaks into his room when he's asleep and shoots him with a freeze ray. He wants him to stop." I was flabbergasted. I wasn't sure what to say other than, "Do you need me to convince you that my son doesn't have a freeze ray?" He laughed. "I think he's been watching too many sci-fi movies." I told him I didn't think things like that existed, but he was very convinced that they do. I told him I'd talk to you about it. I was quite creeped out. My landlord proceeded to tell me that wasn't the weirdest thing he'd had a tenant tell him, and that he thought the guy was harmless. He told me to come to him if I had any more problems. A few days went by, and then I heard a knock at the door late at night again. I was sure it was a neighbor, so I didn't open the door. I shouted through the door, "What do you want?" "I'm trying to sleep and your son keeps freezing me. I'm so cold," he said back. "We were sleeping. My son is here with me. He hasn't been in your house. Maybe you left your air conditioner on," I said. "It was not my air conditioner," he said, and then walked away. A few days went by. Then, during the afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Unthinking, I opened the door to see who it was, and immediately had a fist full of $20 shoved in my face. It was a next-door neighbor. "Please," he begged, "please just take it." "What?" I said. "Why do you want me to take your money?" "So you'll leave me alone," he wailed. I pushed the money back at him and said I wasn't taking it. I told him my son didn't have a freeze ray, but he just walked away. That afternoon, I went to the police and tried to get a restraining order. They told me that they couldn't give me one because it's not against the law to be crazy. They did send an officer to talk to the man, though. The man insisted to the cop that he had done nothing wrong, but strangely made no mention of my son and his freeze ray. I was afraid now that things would escalate since I talked to the police. I went to the landlord and asked him if he could get the man to move to another unit, or even have us move to another unit. He talked to the man, and the man was as eager to move as we were. I didn't hear anything from the old man after that, so I assumed he had moved to another unit. Next time I went in to pay the rent, I asked him if the man had moved out to another apartment. He said that he hadn't had the chance to move him because he just skipped out one day, leaving all his belongings there. He said a week later he was sitting in his office and saw the man's car pull up outside. He had some mail, including license plates for the man, and got it out for him. But then he saw the man's car driving away and realized he had forgotten to turn the close sign to open. The man never came back for his belongings or license plates. I sort of feel sorry for him. He obviously needs medication or something. I'm glad I never saw him again. I was afraid to let my son play outside while he was living there. We had a really nice, friendly neighbor move in after that.